Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is the creepiest, non-paranormal, explainable event that has happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
This happened to my mom in the early 70s. My mom was deep asleep in the middle of the night, but something jarred her awake. In the darkness of her bedroom, she could see a strange man opposite her bed staring at her. She had no idea who this guy was and was terrified because she was a single parent at the time, and my older brother, who was about 3, was in the next bedroom. My mom calmly asked the guy who he was and what he was doing there. He informed her that he was the son of my grandma's friend and he just had to meet my mom. My mom decided that the best course of action was to treat this guy like a family friend and offered to make some coffee and brought him into the kitchen. She tried to make small talk with him until he left a couple hours later after she told him she had to get to school in the morning. Fortunately, the guy left pretty easily. My mom thought for sure she was going to be raped and murdered by this guy. She never learned how he figured out where she lived, but as far as she knows, he never bothered her again. When I was 16, a good friend and I were out at a local convenience store late one night getting junk food. I overheard a man speaking loudly to the female clerk about his trucking rig having broke down out on US 2, not too far from the store we were in. She was telling him there wasn't much she could do, and that's when he asked a guy at the counter for a lift. The guy said no. He wasn't headed that way and left. My friend and I weren't headed in that direction either, but I thought I'd be a good Samaritan and give the guy a lift back to his truck as he seemed desperate. So we pay for our junk food and start driving down US 2. We get about 8 miles, and the whole time I'm asking where the truck is, and the guy just keeps saying, "It's right up here, not far now." There was something off about the guy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the way he was smiling to himself and mumbling made me nervous, and from the look on my friend's face, I could see I was feeling the same. We get like 20 miles outside of town, where there's nothing but forest and swamp as far as the eye can see in either direction. There are no streetlights, and we hadn't passed another car our entire drive there, as it's like 2 a.m. by this point. I figured we would just drop this guy off and go, but he insisted we try and help with his truck, even though both of us told him we knew nothing about engines. We get out, and he anxiously hops into the cab of his rig and tries to turn the engine over. It makes some "I want to start but can't" sound, and the guy loudly proclaims, "See, it's not working," as if he needed to prove it to us. He gets out, lifts the hood, and shines a light into the engine so we can see. He starts pointing at things far back on the engine, and I'm just kind of watching things play out as I'm in the negative when it comes to being mechanically inclined. I notice the guy's right hand is off behind him, and he keeps motioning with the light in his left hand back to the engine. He looked at me and says, "Maybe if you hold this light for him towards where he's looking, he could see better, and I'll go try and start it again." As he hands me the light, he leaned forward a little, exposing his right hand, which held a hammer tightly. I said to my friend we really needed to get going, just as headlights from a pickup truck came around the corner. The driver sees the 3 of us, slows and rolls down his window. He asks if everything is all right, and the trucker says, "Oh yeah, we're nearly done here." I immediately say, "Actually, do you know anything about engines? Because his truck won't start, and we really need to get going." The pickup driver says he does. He says he's going to pull up behind us to get off the road so someone doesn't come speeding along in the dark and hit him. As he makes a U-turn and pulls into place, I watch the truck driver lean into the engine, and there's an audible click of a switch sound before he draws his hand back. He walks to the cab, staring at me the entire time, climbs in, and fires up the truck. It didn't hesitate or give him any kind of trouble whatsoever. He simply pulled off into the night before the pickup driver could even get out of his truck. Looking back on it, I have no doubt we came very close to being another couple of missing kids.
I mean, I'm no expert, but that sounds pretty murdery to me.
Did a week-long travel trip for work, and I stayed at a house from Airbnb. It was a decent neighborhood. 10 p.m. I decided to go out for a jog around the area when I noticed this male silhouette standing across the street looking at me. I thought nothing of it and kept jogging. Jogged about a mile later and stopped to stretch. I see the exact same silhouette standing across the street looking at me. What the F? How did he get there that fast, I thought. I thought he might have been following me jogging, but didn't sense someone running behind me. I jogged for another 2 miles, and looking back to make sure he wasn't following me, which I didn't notice he did, And then there's the same silhouette again, standing right in front. It's like he either flew or teleported. Eventually I stood still, and eventually he left, gliding on the road, and I noticed he was wearing a very quiet rollerblades. I jogged back to the house, and there he was again, and he rolled up to me, and we talked. There I found out he was a nearby neighbor, and he was on neighborhood watch, indeed, wearing rollerblades. So when I was in high school, I had two neighbors across the street, a man in his 40s and what I assume was his mother in probably her 70s. The mom was pretty clearly mentally ill. I'm not a doctor, so I have no idea what was going on with her, but she wore plastic bags on her feet, and she would always hobble outside with her walker onto their grass outside and just yell random stuff. Typical mentally ill person fare, the devil this, the government that, etc. Now, she always had a walker, and I saw her use it for years. One day, I'm homesick from school, and in the middle of the afternoon she goes outside and starts yelling stuff, then returns inside. I was just about to grab the mail. My National Geographic was delivered, but waited till she went back in. I'm at the mailbox and see the door open, so I try and make a quick exit, and this woman suddenly throws down her walker and sprints at me yelling, "You're that little bitch, you're the devil." And I effing bolt, make it into the house and lock the door. She stands outside, peering into the front window for 2 hours while I try to get a hold of my parents, no cell phones at the time. Anyway, my mom went and talked to the son later that day. Apparently, she was on a new medication that was just effing her up and wasn't feeling pain, which is why she sprinted despite needing a walker, or at least that's what he told my mom. Still scares the shit out of me though. I'm still freaked out by this, but anyway, when I was 18 I lived at my girlfriend's house with her parents, and it was a duplex, so we had neighbors right on the other side of the house. We had our room up in the attic, which was right next to the bedroom where this couple had their bedroom in. The only part of the house where the duplex directly connected was the crawl space that connected these two attic bedrooms, but that didn't bother us. We didn't think there was anything to worry about. We find out 3 months later that this 40-year-old mother that lived in the attic room over was mentally unstable and would constantly crawl into the crawl space that led to behind our bed and would record our conversations every night. She would just sit there and listen to us and record what we said, completely unknown to us, for 3 effing months. Apparently, she was obsessed with us and wanted to figure stuff out about us. We found out after she showed my girlfriend's mother. We stayed at my father's house for a while until they got evicted for not paying rent. I was in the hospital, and there was a man there with either psychosis, dementia, or something, I'm not sure. He would walk up and down the hallway all day talking to someone that wasn't there about the seemingly most random things. "Dude, I get you. Little brothers are the worst," and such. One day, as I was walking down the hallway, he stopped his mumbling mid-sentence, stopped walking, and stared at me. When I looked, all he did was whisper, "Are you scared? You should be," and then walked away. The second job I ever had was at a tiny family-owned store where there were never more than 4 employees at any one time. For a fair amount of time, we had this creepy guy who would come in. His clothes were always clean, but his hair was always greasy, like he hadn't washed in a month. English wasn't his first language, and he had a pretty bad stutter, and he would occasionally spit on you as he talked. He would also come in and hone in on my only female coworker, making no effort to hide the fact he was staring at her chest whenever he spoke with her. I believe she said he never made eye contact with her in all the time he came in. One day, he stops coming in, and we're all happy. About 2 years later, I'm working a new job 1 city over, and I run into the guy. He remembers me and my coworker. He freaks me the F out as he discusses my father and the cars he owns. I'm handicapped, and my father used to take me to work and would pick me up from my old job. This dude had never come into the store anywhere near the beginning or end of my shift, so he had to have been keeping a watch on the store for some reason. About 2 years after that, the guy hires on as a temp worker where I work, stares at me constantly, and never says a word. I take down my name and personal stuff from my desk so he can't learn any more about me. My boss and coworkers mock me for this. A few weeks later, before his project is done, the guy disappears from the office. Management absolutely refuses to talk about why he's suddenly gone, and at the same time, everyone stops making fun of me for being paranoid about him. It's been about 20 years since I last saw him, but if he did show up again, it wouldn't surprise me. When I was a teenager, probably 15 to 16, we lived in an old house that had many additions over the years. One of these additions was a large sunroom conversion at the back of our house, which was a second-story level with an attached deck. One sweaty summer night, I was sitting in the back room, all of the windows thrown open, the back door open wide with our screen door locked, and it was around 2 to 3 a.m. I was watching TV, and I started to get the weirdest prickling feeling on my neck. It felt like I was not noticing something important. I got up and wandered into the kitchen, roamed the house for a bit, then gave up the ghost and came back. After about 10 minutes, I felt the same weird sensation. Next door to us, the neighbor had a large barn that was converted into a 4-car garage with white siding, and the direct line of sight out of the screen door from where I was sitting was the side of the garage. As it happened, my neighbor had a son, a little bit older than me, who had just gotten home. As he pulled into their driveway, the headlights illuminated the side of their garage, and for one brief instant, the outline of someone standing on the other side of my screen door was thrown into sharp relief, and I clearly saw a person staring at me. Naturally, I screamed at the top of my lungs, and I heard them thundering down the back stairs. My dad came running into the back room, carrying his handgun, and I couldn't even speak. I just pointed towards the back door, and he ran outside after them. He didn't find anyone. I never sat out there at night without every blind closed and without the door locked again. To this day, I still have issues with windows being open at night because of the uncertainty of what's going on outside.
Have you ever had a childhood trauma that altered the way you lived your life as an adult, like this?
I was 14 and in the Boy Scouts, and we were on a canoeing trip down the Buffalo River in Arkansas. It was a 6-day trip, and it was just our little crew of about 10 boys and 3 adults. We had not seen anyone outside of our crew for days. We would canoe several miles and pick some random spot to sleep each night. This one night, me and a friend decided we were not going to sleep in the tent. We wanted to sleep in some hammocks by the river. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night being eaten alive by mosquitoes and decided that this was a stupid idea and began walking to my tent that the tent buddy had set up and was sleeping in without me. The field we chose to camp on that night was quite large, so the tents were spread out very far apart. I'm walking by one of the tents, and I see this shape huddled up next to it, and I assumed it was one of the boys' backpacks, but it was oddly shaped and could have been a person. It was very dark, and I couldn't see. For some reason, I decided to kick it while I was walking past to make sure it was just a bag. When I kicked it, it grunted in pain. It surprised the shit out of me. You must understand that we were in the middle of nowhere, out in the wilderness, so my first thought was that Adam, the guy who was supposed to be sleeping in that tent, was outside of it for some reason. So I knelt down beside him and asked, "What are you doing out here?" The man replied, "I like you people." That's when my heart nearly exploded out of my chest. This was a stranger. This was not Adam. Fear seized me. I noticed he had a knife in a sheath on his belt loop. I was trying my best to stay calm. I will never understand why I thought that I needed to get that knife away from him. I should have run screaming, but I didn't want to alarm him. I went to grab the knife, and he grabbed my arm and said, "You need to go to bed." I said, "Okay," and got up and walked the remaining 100 or so feet to my tent. I woke up my tent mate damn near hysterical, just knowing he was going to come in any second and kill us. I woke him up and told him the story, and he, being much braver than me, went out there and walked around and came back and said he didn't see anyone and he thought I was making the whole thing up. The next morning, when I woke me up and told me the adults wanted to talk to me, I walk out of the tent and I can see people's shit just strewn everywhere. Apparently the guy, whoever he was going outside each tent and going through the backpacks looking for stuff to steal, I guess. One of the adults had an expensive camera missing. The adults went and searched for signs that someone else was on this part of the river, but never found anyone or anything. To date, that is the scariest moment of my life, and though I am 36 years old and my wife mocks me, I still sleep with a nightlight. When I had just turned 13, I went to meet a friend at a nearby elementary school. I almost always brought my dog, who had an incredible ability to detect creeps, but this time I left her at home. This school had a circular driveway at the entrance and some benches, so I waited on the bench for my friend. Suddenly, there was no traffic on the usually busy street. No pedestrians, not a soul around. Some 30-ish black guy in a 90s gold sedan pulls in and asks me for directions to a main street nearby. I tell him, hoping that's all he wanted. Of course it's not. It never is. Parents, please make sure your child knows that no grown man actually needs directions from a young child and that they should just run and call the cops. He proceeds to try to engage me in small talk and subtly hit on me. Still not a soul nearby. I'm internally panicking, knowing that I will soon have to make an escape. He gets around to asking for my age, so I tell him I looked older, so sometimes telling a creep I was 13 did the trick. Nope. He's getting excited and looks like he's getting out. As I'm preparing to run for my life, a lady walking a dog walks up from nowhere and the guy peeled out. Never went anywhere without my dog again.
Well, now considering technology with Google Maps and Waze and other GPS devices, it would seem odd. But you could still be nice, but be aware.
I've got something going on right now that creeps me out. It involves my landlord building owner. Let me describe her. She's either Western Asian or Eastern European, perhaps Turkish or thereabouts. She's very standoffish and doesn't say much. I don't know if it's because she doesn't know much English or what, but most of my interactions have been through the property manager. She definitely gives off a vibe that makes me uneasy, and has since I first met her. She recently bought the duplex I'm living in. In addition to that, she's not renewing our lease or the neighbors, it's a duplex, because she wants to renovate. Fair enough. But ever since the neighbors moved out, weird things have been happening. She's around a lot, like a lot. Again, fair enough. She's probably doing work next door or getting ready to renovate. But at times, she can be seen wandering around the yard looking seemingly at nothing. I didn't think too much of it until a couple of weeks ago when I left for work, when she was just getting there. My roommate was already long gone. When I got home later, before my roommate, the front door was wide open. Nothing was taken, and nothing appeared out of place, but my door was wide open. I know for a fact that I closed the door and locked it, and my roommate hadn't been home. This happened again last week. Each time I've gone through every corner of the house with a gun and found nothing. But both times, she was there before I left for work. I'm convinced she's been snooping around. In addition to that, just this past Saturday, I was home alone and about to go to bed when I heard something next door, in the place that's supposed to be empty at around 1 a.m. Turns out it was footsteps. I instantly go into search and destroy mode and start guarding the entrances and looking around. Finally, I looked outside and her car is parked next to mine. I go outside and look through the neighbor's window. All of the lights were off, but I could hear her walking around. At this point, paranoia got the best of me, and I stayed up all night waiting for her to do something. Also, I had to be at work by 6, so I had to get up early anyway. I wasn't actually going to make it to bed that night. So 4 a.m. rolls around when I was planning to get up, and I look and she's still there. So I go take a shower, and when I come back and check the window, her car was gone. So she must have heard me and booked it out of there before I noticed. Since then, she's been there for a few hours in the early morning twice that I know of. My roommate and I are creeped out and don't trust her, though I can say if she decides to take it up a notch and come in while we're there, she's going to meet me on the other side of my door with my Mossberg.